Hey, Anne here, and today we're talking about how female characters are written in comic book films. So, in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the towel is used as a shorthand to indicate that a person really has their life together. If they can get across the galaxy and still have their towel, they are a force to be reckoned with.
It's a tough galaxy. You want to survive out here, you've got to know where your towel is.
I've always thought that female characters in mainstream stories function in the same way. If the work has gone so far as to actually ensure the lady has a solid arc, then they've likely addressed other potential gaps in the writing, and you'll have something great on your hands. It's not a coincidence that shows and movies generally considered well-written also have complex female characters. That's how you can tell they're well-written.
Who are you?
Someone like you. Someone who'll rattle the cages.
Anyone can write a pretty good story of men running around, apparently. It takes effort to get you interested in what the woman is doing.
Colonel Phillips.
I can see that you are breaking into candidates. That's good.
So let's apply that idea to comic book movies and what you can tell about a story based on how the love interest is incorporated into it. So we're going to be talking about Betty and Sue and Jean and Mary Jane. And what are these names? I don't know about you, but the only Mary Jane I know is my grandmother, and she just turned 100 years old. My point is, one really important thing to keep in mind about these movies is that they are, first and foremost, adaptations of stories written decades before, statistically, any of us were born.
She's gotta be 100 years old right now. So are we, pal.
To create a superhero movie means updating the story for a very different audience. And this is especially important for the female characters. How they decide to adapt the love interest is a good indicator of how the film works as an adaptation in general. So today we're going to talk about the 3 tiers into which most love interest characters fall. The unattainable object, the superheroine side plots, or the well-written woman. This will not be an exhaustive list, but instead an exemplary one to show how each tier affects the writing of the story overall. Let's start with the lowest tier.
We're the substitute people.
Substitute people.
I've been the substitute person my whole life.
Allow me to preface this section by saying that a character being an object in the story of the protagonist is not necessarily a bad thing. For example, the mentor character in many of these movies, Uncle Ben, Alfred, etc., is essentially just a tool of the story. It may be fun to consider what Alfred gets up to when Bruce is out doing stuff, but the movies don't really care about this, and they aren't inviting you to either. Even when Alfred is dying in Batman and Robin, it's more about how this affects the young people than him as a person.
And quite well, it seems. Thanks to you, son. Thanks to you all.
So when people complain that a female character was just an object in a story, it's a shorthand to describe 2 kinds of problems. First, in a lot of mainstream stories, she's the only woman on screen.
Where are the ladies, gentlemen?
Which has unfortunate implications for the role women can play in the universe where superheroes exist. Second is that having the woman be the object of a love story instead of ever being the subject of one portrays a kind of romance in which women are trophies instead of participants. Neither of these are a good way to write female characters.
Never rub another man's rhubarb.
Some examples of this tier are Vicky Vale in Batman 89, Betty Ross in The Hulk, kind of Jane Foster in Thor 2, but the prime example is Mary Jane in the 2003 Spider-Man movie.
That girl. The girl next door. Mary Jane Watson.
Now, I know some of you are already upset at the implication that these movies were anything but perfect. However, do you like MJ? Do you love her? Because this series requires, more than many others, for you to relate to the world just like Peter Parker does in order to engage with it. And Peter adores MJ. She is perfect to him.
The woman I've loved since before I even liked girls.
If you ask him, he'll say that nothing could be better than ending up with her.
Thank you, Mary Jane Watson.
But I'm betting that you don't agree with him. From what I've seen online, most people seem to hate her. But she's not supposed to be some kind of hate sink where you enjoy bad things happening to her. She's the opposite. She's the love sink, if that's a thing. Peter loves her more than anything, and if you don't get where he's coming from, that's a sign of bad writing.
Do you want to push me away?
Why would I want to push you away? I love you.
If she's so blank a character that you can despise her even more easily than love her, then that's bad. That's a flaw in the story. So let's dig into why it's so easy to read this character in exactly the opposite way from what the writers intended. At the start, she is the ideal, the trophy that Peter wants to attain.
But let me assure you, this, like any story worth telling, is all about a girl.
Pursuit of her changes his life in two significant ways. First, it causes him to be standing in just the right spot to get bitten by a radioactive spider. That obviously changes everything for him. Well, for her, nothing. She's just on a field trip. Her neighbor wanted a picture of her, and she goes to hang out with her friends.
MJ, let's go.
For the second, she runs outside upset about her home situation. You might think that this gives some depth to her character, but let's do a critical reading here. Why is this scene included in the movie? Is it so we get to know MJ better as a person? No, it's here for Peter to feel compassion, and frankly feel like he's a much better potential partner for her than the one she's got, because he will listen to her problems.
Oh, that's perfect. You're awesome in all the school plays.
Really?
It's all about Peter's feelings, not hers. When she's excited about Flash's car, it's just so Peter now wants a car.
Oh my god, it's gorgeous!
Leading, of course, to the most significant moment in his life.
Over here, Uncle Ben.
Does this relate to MJ as a character at all? Does this ever come back? No, not really. She never cares about a car again, and she breaks up with this guy the very next time we see her.
Here's your ring.
You know what? Whatever.
A scene included just so Harry sees she's now available, allowing him to snatch her up before Peter can.
We're going out, didn't he tell you?
After they graduate, the reason she is struggling to be successful is to match how Peter is doing the same. Not to tell us more about her, just to show how alike they are.
I think he'd hate the idea of my waiting tables. He'd think it was low or something.
You know, Harry, he doesn't live on a little place I like to call Earth.
When she is dating Harry, it's not to explore either character. It's just because she has to remain unattainable for most of the film. And more importantly, be put in danger so she can be rescued. That's basically her whole thing in this story, to be honest.
Can Spider-Man come out to play?
Where is she?
When Peter realizes that this is happening, he of course does the noble thing of shutting her out. You know, instead of confessing anything, so she knows why she's always the target of supervillains.
Would it be so dangerous to let Mary Jane know how much you care? Everybody else knows.
So we end with him deciding that being a superhero is a curse, actually, and he has to drive her away.
Only a friend? Peter Parker?
That's all I have to give.
As if the problem will resolve as long as they're not dating. But as Harry says,
He pretends like he doesn't, but there's no one Peter cares for more.
she's in danger because of Peter's feelings, and he gives her no agency in deciding the solution to this problem. That's because she isn't a character who can control her own fate. She exists solely for Peter's heroism and to provide an outlet for us to know how he's feeling.
Truth is, you don't know what you feel, except you know what kind of man you want to be.
Seriously, a significant indicator that a female character falls into this tier is that most of her conversations are A, with the hero, and B, about his emotions, regarding his hero status, with nothing for her to do but look concerned.
You said that.
Oh, something like that.
Anyway, MJ is just included in this story to show Peter's arc. Her existence, not herself as a person, gives him something to prove. At the start, to prove he's a viable potential partner for her.
Any story worth telling is all about a girl.
And at the end, to prove he's a real hero by being willing to sacrifice what he wants.
All I wanted was to tell her how much I loved her. I can't.
All of this is really exemplified by this scene, where she's about to be mugged, murdered, assaulted, an event that only occurs so Spider-Man can rescue her. And for this kiss to happen. It requires MJ not to act like a woman who was just attacked, and also it kind of breaks the universe by happening. So here's my hot take. These movies are remembered for how great the New Yorkers are, how they help Spidey when he's vulnerable.
You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us!
But honestly, I can't reconcile that with this scene.
Hey, check it out, man.
What a bleak outlook for women watching this. A man in a costume can get empathy from strangers when vulnerable. A woman is attacked just for existing.
Don't go up any dark alleys.
So that's the problem with having your female character just be a tool in the narrative. At best, she's taken on the whole emotional burden of the hero's story. At worst, what happens to her is going to break the themes of your movie, or at least the setting. MJ didn't ask to have a costume hero fall in love with her. She doesn't know that Peter is Spidey, except maybe right here. She doesn't know why she keeps getting attacked by the supervillain. Being loved by a hero is really awful for her, actually. She's in danger all the time, from New Yorkers, from the Goblin, from later supervillains, and nothing she does can change that.
I can't survive without you.
Honestly, in Spider-Man 3, she's written to be pretty bitchy. Please note I said written to be and not is. The reason for that is, when you write a female character who has no depth and only exists to drive the hero's emotional arc, it's really easy to fall into the dark side of that, where she's a nag and an obstacle to his emotional arc.
I can do better, I can change.
Not that simple.
Because she's just been an object who reflects his emotions all along. It's quite simple to go from being on a pedestal to being despised. Am I right, ladies? Because in neither case is the woman real, with any kind of interiority or wants or needs. She has boyfriends in this series just so Peter can be upset that he doesn't measure up.
I'd like to tell you that's me next to her.
Aren't you guys living together? We're going out, didn't he tell you?
You mean like a boyfriend?
Well, like I like him.
You know what I want for us?
There's someone else!
She almost gets married so Peter can see how much he's failed at juggling his crap.
Peter Parker.
Yeah.
He's just a great big jerk.
She does badly at her job so Peter can screw up their relationship.
Peter, you have no idea how I feel right now.
Naturally, any strife in their relationship puts her back in the box of being into other men and reflecting back Peter's emotions for us to see.
I thought I could be there for you, Mary Jane. But I can't.
She's never grown beyond that as a character. And that's why making the love interest just an object in the story is a problem. It implies that the relationships aren't between two equals, they're between the main character and a sexy lamp. And it often leads to accidentally undoing the themes of your story. New York isn't safe for MJ at any point. It's not a friendly neighborhood, and Spider-Man caring about her actively puts her in all kinds of danger.
Spider-Man will always have enemies. I can't let you take that risk.
It doesn't make her life any better. Spidey has to spend so much time rescuing her. How can he have time to be a hero to anyone else?
You're not Superman, you know.
So of course people hate her. She represents a standard to which Peter is being held, and if he fails, it's easy to empathize with him and hate her for it.
When you look in her eyes, it's as if you've reached the unreachable. And you weren't ready for it.
When in reality, all these standards are just in his head. These things he's trying to prove are not things she asked of him.
I'm gonna come see your play tomorrow night.
You're coming? Don't disappoint me.
It's unfair to lay that at her feet. He never even asked her out. She never said he needed a car or a job or whatever. But she is the object by which Peter's success is measured, both as a hero and as a man. And putting a female character into that small of a box is going to encourage more resentment than adoration.
I want to be here for you.
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
I decided to use Kirsten Dunst classic Elizabethtown as the bumpers for this video because of how it does what Spider-Man is trying to do, but so much better. You may know this as the movie from which the phrase manic pixie dream girl, derogatory, was coined. That's essentially what MJ is supposed to be for Peter.
Nothing would stop the plan.
She wore faded jeans and soft black leather.
It's like any story worth telling is all about a girl. That girl. The girl next door.
Except Claire is here to remind Drew why life is worth living.
All right, you really failed.
You want to be really great? Then have the courage to fail big and stick around. Make them wonder why you're still smiling.
So it's easy for us to fall in love with her.
It's midnight. Life cannot be so cruel that we don't deserve to be together. To eat.
Like MJ, she has a boyfriend, and the protagonist has to prioritize taking care of other people over his feelings for her.
You knew? And I thought I was so mysterious.
Trust me, everybody is less mysterious than they think they are.
But Claire is much more of a person than MJ, despite being easily reduced to manic pixie dream girl. And she and Drew end up together because this movie is about how making connections with people is what makes life worth it.
Oh, you really brought everybody together. I'll give you that.
This is the culmination of the theme of the whole film.
No true fiasco ever began as a quest for mere adequacy. The Pacific Northwestern salmon beats itself bloody on its quest to travel hundreds of miles upstream with a single purpose. Sex, of course, but also life.
While the ending of Spider-Man has a strong stance on what being a hero means.
This is my gift. My curse.
It's a responsibility that requires driving everyone away and giving up everything you want.
Only a friend?
That's all I have to give.
Peter Parker wanted a car, so he did some shenanigans to try to get one. This resulted in his uncle being murdered, and he never gets a car because he doesn't deserve it. And MJ is put in the same place in the narrative as a car we never see. She's the idea of happiness, not in the demonstrable way that Claire is, just in a vague way, so we can applaud Peter for sacrificing it.
All I wanted was to tell her how much I loved her. I can't.
I'm just saying these movies aren't actually that good because of how much they fumble one of the most important characters in them.
She doesn't really know who I am.
Because you won't let her.
Anyway, let's look at something a bit better.
I'm not used to girls like you.
That's because I'm one of a kind.
What I mean by a superheroine side plot is that the lady is a superpowered character in her own right, and she probably has more to her existence than just being a goal for the protagonist.
I would love to live with you in your castle, forever just like in a fairy tale. I just couldn't live with myself.
So that's obviously an improvement. However, since she's not the main character herself, there can still be some unintended issues with the writing, such as her arc being pretty uneven.
Nothing lasts forever.
Some examples are Sue Storm in Fantastic Four, Natasha Romanoff in Age of Ultron, or Selina Kyle in Batman Returns. For our chief example, let's talk about Jean Grey in the X-Men trilogy.
I believe you've already met Dr. Jean Grey.
This series is a bit uneven in a lot of ways. Logan doesn't have much of an arc for all that he's more of a main character than anyone else is. The stakes of the first movie are a fairly standard villain terrorist attack kind of plot. The second movie ramps this up by threatening to genocide all mutants, thwarted to then be a genocide of all humans. They fortunately stopped both, but somewhat understandably it was hard to top the stakes of 2 genocides for the next movie. So the third film throws everything at the wall, and it's not very good.
I want you to be what you are.
However, despite having multiple different folks working on it, Jean Grey has a solid progression through the trilogy. She starts as timid and unsure of her powers, graduates to using them a little more intentionally, dies, and then has the Phoenix Force, which is not explained because, again, this movie is bad, and then she dies again. Yay!
Thank you, Miss Grey. It was quite educational.
But anyway, I think she's a good example of what it looks like when a protagonist has a love interest who's also a superhero. And all the romance is a side plot instead of a driving motivation. Let's go through it. We meet Dr. Grey at this Senate hearing, making some good arguments.
Are mutants dangerous?
After all, the wrong person behind the wheel of a car can be dangerous.
But we meet Jean properly here, through Logan. In a scene where she shows us her powers, but then is easily overpowered by him. Maybe in a hot way, I don't know. She gets to be there in the introduction to the X-Men scene, and then shows him where he'll be staying, and tells him a surprising amount about herself considering she just met the guy.
I also have some telepathic ability.
Well, like your professor?
Nowhere near that powerful.
But whatever, this movie kind of feels like fanfic in the amount of emotional info dumping going on. I mean that affectionately. Especially this scene. But that's not important right now.
It was an accident.
Anyway, Jean is not really an object in Logan's story, which is nice. She has her own things going on, to an extent.
So read my mind.
I'd rather not.
Her dating Scott is not framed as why she's an unattainable trophy like MJ. As Scott points out, if he had to warn Logan off...
Well, if I had to do that, she wouldn't be my girl.
It's not really portrayed at any point like we should be waiting for her to break up with Scott so she can get with Logan.
What do you see?
Scott.
This is a story about adults, and that aspect feels like it. They're attracted to each other, clearly, but...
Girls flirt with the dangerous guy, Logan. You don't take him home. You married a good guy.
Logan's not exactly relationship material. This is just kind of showing how hot he is. So no one's really pushing for Jean to end up with him.
But what do you want?
What do you really want?
I consider this a significant improvement on the previous kind of love interest. Jean isn't a load-bearing part of the plot because of Logan's feelings. She's a load-bearing part of the plot because she's one of the X-Men.
You'll be here when we get back. Unless you plan on running off again.
And also, Logan has some feelings for her, which gets to add some depth to both characters, and to Scott, without reducing anyone to be defined by these feelings.
Oh, and Logan, stay away from my girl.
That makes Jean seem more like a person than an object. I immediately loved this movie when I saw it while I watched Spider-Man and never thought about it again, to be honest. However, it's still not an ideal way to represent your female love interest. She goes through a lot in this trilogy, but it isn't really a character arc, just stuff that happens to her.
Jean?
Oh God. So it doesn't develop her as a person, more as an entity.
I keep feeling something terrible is about to happen.
In X1, she's pretty nervous about her powers, and that means she's put in danger a lot.
All right, back up, back up.
No. Much more than anyone else is, except possibly Rogue. Somebody help me! Actually, things are going pretty badly for all the ladies. But mainly you can see my point with how this is going for everyone. Why does Jean spend 20 minutes incapacitated by Toad?
Oh, God.
I like that she's part of the climax, but none of these things are her idea, or is she the main contributor. She is helping Scott and Storm use their powers. Which, like, yeah, that's good for a team-up movie, but she's the least important of the X-Men. While Logan is by far the most important, despite not technically being part of the team.
Jean, get Logan a uniform.
Oh, wait a minute. He's not coming with us, is he?
He leaves at the end, which is nicely framed as being a more emotional situation for Rogue, because of her crush, than for Jean, who's, you know, an adult with a boyfriend.
Hey.
I'll be back for this. You can tell her my heart belongs to someone else.
You and I.
How's the professor?
I like that a lot. Definitely preferable to the ending for MJ in Spidey 1. Then X2 gives her a fun subplot. She's happy-ish to see Logan back. There's simmering sexual tension.
Oh, I could probably think of a few reasons to stick around.
But her vulnerable moment is with Scott.
My dreams are getting worse. Scott.
And then she spends the next half of the movie with Storm.
These are the coordinates.
And Kurt, but she barely talks to him. So the subplot doesn't give her that much to do, but it is nice that the X-Men get to do X-Man-y things in this movie. When they are attacked, she shows some interesting powers, but like in X1, she fails to finish what she started.
There was some display of power up there.
Obviously, it wasn't enough.
So she continues to not have any real valuable impact on the plot. Kinda true for all the ladies, especially in this plane crash where they're all shockingly bad at things.
Oh my God, there's two of them.
Oh God.
When will these people learn how to fly?
during the finale, she has to fight Scott, which could be an interesting exploration of their relationship.
Go! I'll take care of him!
This is one lover's quarrel we cannot get involved in, my dear.
But it is not that. She's injured and is something of a liability until the ending, where she dies to save everyone. A sacrifice that doesn't make a lot of logistical sense, but I guess it's nice to see her use her powers effectively for the first time.
I know what I'm doing. This is
the only way.
Now you can say her inability to use her powers is explained by this in X3.
I'm trying to restore the psychic blocks and cage the beast again.
But since this movie was made by entirely different people years later, I don't think there's much basis to say that this was the plan all along.
Like your professor?
Nowhere near that powerful. But he's teaching me to develop it.
Anyway, in X3, she's a force of nature, but not in a good way. Storm can control her powers and wreak havoc. Jean has little in the way of motivation and just screws things up. She tries to seduce Logan, she kills Scott, she kills Professor X. All of these things real Jean would be pretty upset about. We don't explore this, and this Jean has no reason behind her actions. She's just a chaotic entity.
You have no idea of what she is capable.
Then she stands around looking cool, available to be a tool in Magneto's plan. And that doesn't work, so Logan has to put her down.
Save me.
And be very angsty about it, because obviously his feelings in murdering her are more important than any she might have had in this entire movie. Also, this undoes what is presumably the theme of the story, about how mutants have the right to exist without being controlled.
The fact that mutants who have come forward and revealed themselves publicly have been met with fear, hostility, even violence.
And of course, you know how the government will respond. They'll reintroduce the Registration Act.
Then why not stay in disguise all the time?
Because we shouldn't have to.
The cure is, a bad thing to force on them.
Is it true? They can cure us? They can't cure us. Because there's nothing to cure. Nothing's wrong with you. Or any of us, for that matter.
This is what they want for all of us.
I get that in the comics there's other explanations of Phoenix, but in the movies, she's just a really powerful mutant.
Jean Grey is the only Class 5 mutant I've ever encountered. Her potential practically limitless. The conscious Jean, whose powers were always in her control, and the dormant side, came to call itself the Phoenix.
So this ending shows how, actually some mutants are so powerful they have to be taken out of the equation for anyone else to live.
You would die for them.
Save me.
Making this guy right. That's a bold take to end the trilogy.
It's a better life. It's what we all want.
So anyway, this is still an improvement on MJ, who never escapes object status. Jean is more than an object. She has a bit of an arc on her own. Unfortunately, this is rarely framed for us to empathize with her, and mostly just something we learn through the male characters. Her thing with Logan is shown from his perspective. It's just a subplot in his story. She talks about it, she doesn't show it, it doesn't add depth to her character. She's in a relationship with Scott, something the movies are very uninterested in exploring. Professor X and she rarely share scenes, for all that she's kind of his protege. Everyone's real sad when she's dead, but showing how they feel after the fact instead of anything while she's alive definitely sucks.
She's gone.
Don't! You don't say that!
Jean is a fellow superhero, which you'd think would put her on equal footing with the male protagonist. It does in terms of the relationship, but definitely not in terms of the narrative. If she wasn't a love interest, we probably would know as little about her as we do about Storm. At least Storm has some great character moments. All of Jean's have her struggling. Things are bothering her and pressing on her, making her evil and need to be killed. She never gets to be competent in any aspect of her life, to the point of it seeming like she doesn't really fit in on the team. She should probably just stay home and watch the kids, right? Sure would be nice if one of the most powerful mutants on the planet got to do more than be a problem to be taken care of in all 3 movies.
Oh, I'll be fine.
Sure?
Yeah.
Okay. I love you.
As a redheaded lady watching, she's far more appealing than MJ in terms of representation, but it is grating how much her powers are a burden. Mystique is thrilling in comparison because she knows exactly how to use her powers to get what she wants. But she's a villain, and that sort of implies that being competent is not something potential love interests are allowed to be. Presumably also why Storm is never considered as a love interest. So that's not great. And of course the endings for both ladies are rather off-putting. But you know it isn't?
I know. I'm impossible to forget, but I'm hard to remember.
Why I consider these characters well written is because there is enough to her to imply that she exists outside of whatever the hero is doing. It's Rachel Dawes being great at her job in Batman Begins.
What will it take to bring him down? And a DA brave enough to prosecute. Rachel Dawes.
No way to bury it now.
Maybe so, but there's still Judge Faden.
Got Faden covered.
Gwen Stacy being as smart and important to the plot as Peter is in Amazing Spider-Man.
I'm gonna get everybody out.
Antidote complete.
Or Peggy Carter being a high-level and capable agent in the first Captain America movie. This is how love interests should be done. And to dig into what that looks like, let's talk about Pepper Potts in Iron Man.
You must be the famous Pepper Potts.
Indeed I am.
Mainly the first one, but we'll get into some of her other appearances as well. In Iron Man, we meet Pepper Potts taking out the trash.
I do anything and everything that Mr. Stark requires, including occasionally taking out the trash.
I don't care for that being something she would say about a woman who turns out to be a journalist of some significance. If it is to set up that Pepper is jealous, that never comes back, which is good. This scene gets us off to a rough start, is all I'm saying.
After all these years, Tony still has you picking up the dry cleaning.
However, the subsequent scenes are pretty good. Pepper is a civilian like MJ, not a hero, but she's still very capable and can contribute to the overall plot.
Oh, there's
It's not pus.
Through more than just her relationship to Tony.
Did you forget about our appointment?
Nope, right now. Come with me.
Instead of being a love sink where all Tony's emotions go, Pepper essentially runs his company and their relationship starts as professional, with presumably neither pining after the other.
I got it.
Okay, you got it. Now don't let it touch you.
So his emotional situation is pretty much evenly divvied up between Rhodey, Obadiah, Yinsen, and Pepper. She doesn't spend all of her conversations listening to him talk about his decision to become a hero or whatever.
I'm not going to be a part of it.
I shouldn't be alive unless it was for a reason.
The fellas are equal recipients of these kinds of discussions from Tony.
I'll probably be dead in a week.
Well then, this is a very important week for you, isn't it?
Rhodey, I'm working on something big. I came to talk to you. I want you to be part of it. I don't want a body count to be our only legacy.
That's what we do. I never got to say goodbye to Dad. I never got to say goodbye to my father.
Our hero is at his lowest point emotionally 3 times in this film, and it is not Pepper's role in the story to be there for these. In the first, he's a prisoner, and Yinsen gives him advice that changes his life.
Don't waste it. Don't waste your life.
The second time is when this reporter tells him about Yinsen's hometown being attacked, and Tony again weaponizes his emotions on the bad guys. And get some emotional support from Rhodey in the process.
It's not a piece of equipment. I'm in it. It's a suit. It's me!
Crazy son of a bitch. You owe me a plane, you know that, right?
The final time is when Tony finds out Obadiah betrayed him, and has betrayed him all along. He's left alone, actively dying. Who comes to his rescue? Well, Pepper, but only by proxy. She brought him this gift earlier to commemorate Tony's change of heart. Literally. But she isn't there now. She is doing something equally important.
She's fine. She's with 5 agents. They're about to arrest Obadiah.
Instead, Dummy saves him immediately, and then Rhodey helps get him out the door. She's supportive, but she's not his only support, nor is that her only role. So one really important thing about this tier of love interest is that they have their own stuff going on. I really love this scene where she goes to investigate Obadiah. Yeah, she's doing that for Tony in a sense, but it's the company she's dedicated her life to, and she also wants to know what's going on with it. More importantly, she doesn't go there to be captured by Obadiah, like MJ essentially does here.
Hiya.
Surprised?
Very.
She goes there so we, the audience, can learn some really important information.
The target you paid us to kill was the great Tony Stark. As you can see, Obadiah.
She walks out of there safely. No need for Tony to rescue her.
Tony doesn't know how lucky he is.
When she does need help, she gets it from Coulson and S.H.I.E.L.D., not from Tony.
I'm gonna give you the meeting of your life. Your office.
Her story is entwined with Iron Man's, but it isn't defined by it. She isn't put in danger just so Tony can prove his heroism by rescuing her. And unlike Jean, she's quite competent at her job. Being in the role of love interest does not weaken her to make the man look stronger. It's almost the opposite, to be honest.
Don't ever ask me to do anything like that ever again.
I don't have anyone but you.
Looking at this movie from Pepper's perspective does not really change much about it. Both versions are about Stark Industries having a supervillain CEO who tries to kill his partner, who's dealing under the table, and putting everyone in danger. Pepper is always in far less danger than Tony is. She's not captured, no one tries to kill her, and she's generally on the same emotional journey as Tony. She also feels betrayed by Obadiah, for example. She isn't there for Tony to pour his emotions into. Gross. They're going through the same things.
And I know in my heart that it's right.
You're all I have too, you know.
In the climax, she goes to the arc reactor building with S.H.I.E.L.D. agents expressly to arrest Obadiah. She isn't there because of anything Tony did. She's there because it's her job.
I'll put something in the book, shall I?
Thank you. Forget about our appointment?
Nope, right now. Come with me.
Looks like you were right. I was building a suit.
I thought it'd be bigger.
This is still a superhero movie, so he does some saving of her. But the framing of how she ends up in danger in most of her appearances is such a refreshing change from MJ and Jean. Pepper isn't put in peril because Tony has feelings for her. Those feelings are not a blessing and a curse. They're just a blessing. They save her from trouble she would have gotten into anyway.
The services are no longer required.
And she's not in danger because she's struggling with her abilities. It's those same abilities that get her out of trouble.
Better get back there.
But it gets better than that. There's the delightful fact that, in all three Iron Man movies, Pepper is the one to dispatch the villain. She overloads the arc reactor on Obadiah. She has Hammer arrested.
Don't call them authorities. Right away. Step aside.
She murders Killian. Sure, Tony does the heavy lifting in the first two, but she is an essential part of the world in these stories. When MJ tries to attack Doc Ock, it simply doesn't work.
Shame on you.
And otherwise, all MJ ever does in the climax of 3 films is scream.
Now shoot!
The movie wants us to believe this woman gets fired because her singing voice isn't loud enough.
Her small voice didn't carry past the first row.
Sure, Jan.
Jean doesn't do much better, though the first movie does give her something to do.
Jean, use your power. Try to steady him.
After that, she's just someone the men have to take care of, and then she dies twice, so...
I know you're still there!
Like Peter and MJ, Tony and Pepper do not end up together at the end of their first film. Peter insists on this because he's too heroic and selfless to put her in danger, even though she was endangered in this movie regardless of their relationship status. Tony floats the idea of Pepper being his girlfriend in this scene, and she's pretty clear on her feelings about the situation.
Tell me you never think about that night.
What night? Will that be all?
Yes, that will Be all, Miss Pence.
I'm going to come back to the scene to which he's referring in a moment, but Pepper does not agree to a relationship with Tony until the end of Iron Man 2, much like MJ in Spider-Man 2. MJ abandons her wedding, the life she'd built outside of Peter, to drop everything and run to his side, for him to just leave immediately. Something she seems okay with.
Go get him, Tiger.
This is a good ending to the movie, it's just not very nice from her perspective.
Go get him, Tiger. Sorry.
Well, Pepper has just had her life threatened yet again after struggling to handle being CEO and just found out Tony had been dying.
You're starting to think like a CEO, taking out the competition. I like that.
What's going on?
I was going to tell you I didn't want to
You were
alarm
going to tell me you really were dying?
You didn't.
And it's all too much.
My body literally cannot handle the stress. I never know if you're gonna kill yourself or wreck the whole company.
He agrees with her and apologizes, and that's how their relationship starts.
You deserve better. You've taken such good care of me. Been in a tough spot, and you got me through it, so...
Thank you for understanding.
Yeah, let's talk clean up.
With her being able to say where her boundaries are, and that she'd rather not be the damsel in distress for his story any longer. Thank you very much.
It's like dog years. I mean, it's like the president's.
The story isn't framed as if we're all just waiting for Pepper to come around on Tony, like MJ is supposed to for Peter. Pepper's an adult with responsibilities and a life outside of Tony Stark, who's not required to handle his issues. But she is an important part of his support structure.
I actually don't think that you could tie your shoes without me.
Keeping what he's going through in Iron Man 2 from her is shown as a mistake on his part, not a way to prove his heroism.
Tony, what are you not telling me?
Even in Iron Man 3, where she is targeted to get at Tony, Happy is also taken out of the picture, specifically to emotionally devastate Tony, who actually seems more bothered that the Iron Man suit doesn't work. He is separated from everyone important to him in that film, not just Pepper. She isn't solely responsible for his mental state, is what I'm saying.
I'm so sorry I put you in harm's way. That was selfish and stupid, and it won't happen again.
While MJ being a runaway bride is just to show us how Peter has overcome his hurdles and will now be a successful superhero. It has nothing to do with any kind of arc on MJ's part.
I know you think we can't be together. I've always been standing in your doorway.
But back to Pepper, the most obvious signal that this female character will not be treated like so many we'd seen before was this scene. The hero is romancing the pretty lady. They talk about how much he needs her.
Really? What's your social security number?
5.
5.
She gets uncomfortable with the situation because he's her boss, and then the romance ends.
I would like a drink, please.
He leaves and goes to do hero things, and we don't see her again until here.
Are those bullet holes?
At the end, he brings up the romance again.
Iron Man, I'd have this girlfriend who knew my true identity. She'd always be worrying that I was going to die, yet so proud of the man I'd become.
And for the first time I'd ever seen, she refers to the fact that the plot happened and left her behind.
Are you talking about the night that we danced and you went downstairs to get me a drink and you left me there by myself?
Usually female characters appear in these specific romantic or damsel scenes and not otherwise, and you simply do not question it. But here they draw attention to the fact that she was left standing out there waiting for him to come back, and she didn't appreciate that.
Is that the night you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
What this means is, you may have forgotten the love interest in the face of all this action, as Tony did himself, but the writers didn't.
Thought so.
Pepper, unlike MJ, or really even Jean, continues to exist when not on screen. She didn't just go back to waiting quietly in the dark until the hero needed her again, for emotional or plot reasons. She's treated as much as a person as any of the male characters, and that's the towel principle. If the love interest is written this well, then the rest of the movie will be too. Pepper isn't the reason Iron Man is a good movie, it's the other way around. Iron Man is a good movie, therefore Pepper is well written. So Pepper exemplifies what I mean about female characters being a barometer for how good a story is overall.
You are a very rare woman.
You shouldn't be the substitute for anybody.
I always find it interesting to track how similar stories have changed over the years. In this case, comparing Spider-Man Homecoming to Spider-Man 2002 reveals a significant change in how love interests are presented.
Probably stop staring before it gets creepy, though.
Too late.
Both Liz and MJ are the person Peter idealizes, who he wants more than anything to show how mature he is.
You're an Avenger. If any one of us has a chance with a senior girl, it's you.
Wow, great reflexes.
MJ is barely a character, with just enough traits to mark her as desirable.
That girl. The girl next door.
While Liz has plenty of things going on that have nothing to do with Peter.
Have fun.
Bye.
When she faces a peril that requires rescue from Spidey, this actually affects her in a realistic way.
Last week, decathlon was the most important thing, but I almost died.
I kept thinking, I hope I make it through this, so I could see Peter Parker's face one more time.
We don't see much of her, certainly less than we do of MJ, but she is more fleshed out as a real person.
I guess you already have a date to Homecoming.
Actually, I'm so busy planning and I never really got around to that part, so. A rebellious group activity the day before competition is good for morale. I heard it in a TED Talk, and I read a coaching book. Yeah, it's our future. I'm not gonna screw it up.
Spidey measures himself against the idea of MJ.
Except you know what kind of man you want to be.
2017 Spidey may scheme to impress her.
Yeah, it's gonna be dope. You should totally invite your personal friend Spider-Man.
I know Peter's way too busy for parties anyways, so.
But she isn't responsible for how he measures his success in any aspect of his life. And that's because his driving motivation is impressing Tony Stark to become an Avenger.
That is not what you thought when I took on Captain America.
I'm not the first to point out the progression of superhero secret identities over the last couple decades, namely that no one has them anymore.
What do they call you? Wheels?
I think the age of social media makes them seem less believable, and also a lot of storylines involving them boil down to a man being angsty and full of masculine purpose, which was played out by 2008.
Wow, it's almost like you're the dragonfly.
But what I haven't heard anyone mention is that since heroes no longer have to rigidly hide their identities, they now have something they largely didn't before, at least in movies, which is, of course, friends, a support system beyond their dead parents and uncles. Tony Stark knows who Spidey is, as does Ned, so Peter doesn't have to put all his angst on the girl he likes. He has people to talk to, and that lets Liz also be more of a person in the narrative because she's not busy providing a way for him to talk about his conflicted feelings.
Really? Right before nationals?
Another interesting, presumably unrelated development is that villains are often an outlet for some of that angst. They are usually the dark mirror of the hero, someone he could have become if circumstances were different, and his frustration and issues with his choice to superhero can be explored through that aspect of the plot, instead of just through dialogue with his lady friend. Like, even though all of Spidey's villains are
something of a scientist myself,
that's not used to explore what sets Peter apart from them. Instead, Peter's heroism is mostly explored through dialogue with MJ. She probably has the most screen time of any of the ladies we talked about. But just because we spent a lot of time looking at Kirsten Dunst's lovely face doesn't mean she has much to do in any of these scenes. Perhaps counterintuitively, given the love interest less screen time can mean using it more effectively to explain who she is and why she fits into the story.
Get me a drink and you left me there by myself.
And that is a strong indication of good writing. Love interest should be, well, interesting, which requires having a life outside of just being something the hero wants. So a good story includes women who have their own stuff going on, who should have some emotional connection to the hero, but not be his only emotional connection, and whose own emotions affect how she reacts to the plot. She doesn't need to be the protagonist or have a great deal of screen time, but what she has needs to effectively communicate who she is and why she and the hero belong together.
I know little of what that's like, to have every door shut in your face.
Historically speaking, a love interest in these kinds of stories existed to prove the heroism of the hero and the villainy of the villain. Only a truly evil person would kidnap this poor defenseless woman, and only a truly good person would risk life and limb to rescue her. It's literally just a kick the dog, save the cat situation. But comic books, and movies thereof, have grown quite a bit beyond that simplicity, and that means how the love interest is written needs to be updated too.
Battalion triage nurse Betty Carver tidies up while the men defend their country.
Nazis! Again! They've got me all tied up. If only Captain America were here here to rescue me.
Who writes this rubbish?
Thank you for listening to me talk about some lovely ladies. I'll be back to comic book movies in a bit, but next time let's stay on the subject of love interests and see how they fit into Disney princess movies. Please like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, join my Patreon, buy me a coffee, all the things so you don't miss it. See you then.